What would you do if you woke up in a hospital bed to find your 6-year-old daughters standing next to a complete stranger they were calling Daddy? This is Aisha's story. And before we dive in, if you love real-life tales of courage, unexpected twists, and the kind of drama that reminds you truth is stranger than fiction, you're in the right place. I'm Mr. Gideon, and here on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We uncover the heartbeats behind them. So hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you'll want to be here for what happens next. It was a Tuesday morning in small-town Indiana. The kind of morning where cornfields stretched endlessly outside kitchen windows, golden and swaying in the early light. Inside Aisha's modest home, the aroma of jollof rice filled the air, a recipe passed down from her mother, one of the few connections she still had to a past that felt both close and impossibly far away. She stood at the stove, exhausted but smiling, because this was her ritual. Wake before sunrise, cook breakfast, prepare her twin daughters for another day, hide the bone-deep fatigue behind a mother's unwavering strength. Taiwo and Kehinde, 6 years old, dark curls escaping from their braids, matching outfits that made them look like mirror images of joy itself. They sat at the small kitchen table, chattering about sunflowers and math lessons, their voices bright and unburdened by the weight their mother carried every single day. Aisha kissed each forehead, her smile never faltering. "Ready for school, girls?" She asked it the same way every morning, and every morning they answered the same, "Yes, Mommy," grabbing the backpacks her own mother had sewn by hand. But here's what Taiwo and Kehinde didn't know. Here's what Aisha would never let them see. She was drowning. Raising twins alone in a town where she was often the only black face in the room wasn't just hard, it was relentless. Every bill was a calculation. Every moment of rest was stolen. Every smile she gave her daughters was proof that love could outlast exhaustion, but only barely. And on this particular Tuesday, barely wasn't going to be enough. They had just finished breakfast. Aisha was clearing the plates, reminding the girls to grab their things when it hit her. A stabbing pain behind her eyes, so sudden and vicious. It felt like someone had driven a spike through her skull. The kitchen lights blazed impossibly bright. The floor tilted beneath her feet. "Mommy, are you okay?" Taiwo's voice cracked with alarm, but Aisha couldn't answer. Her throat closed, her vision blurred, and then her knees buckled. The tile floor rushed up to meet her. "Mommy!" Both girls screamed, throwing themselves to the ground beside her, their small hands clutching at her arms. Aisha wanted to tell them she was fine, wanted to stand up and laugh it off and get them to school on time, but her body wouldn't obey. Her heart thundered in her chest like it was trying to escape. The room spun, then darkened, then disappeared entirely. The last thing she felt was her daughter's tiny hands on her skin. The last thing she heard was their voices calling for her. And then, nothing. Silence. When Aisha opened her eyes again, the world was white, sterile. The sharp smell of disinfectant mixed with something floral she couldn't place. Her head throbbed. Her mouth felt like cotton. And standing beside her hospital bed were her daughters, Taiwo clutching her hand, tears streaming down her face, and Kehinde near the door, pale with fear. But they weren't alone. Above them stood a man. Tall, calm. Someone Aisha didn't immediately recognize, though something about him tugged at the edges of her memory. He knelt down, gathering the twins into his arms with a tenderness that made Aisha's chest tighten. "There you are," he said gently, smiling through tears. And that's when Aisha heard it, the two words that made her world tilt all over again. Daddy. Her daughters, her babies, the ones she'd raised alone for 6 years, were calling this stranger Daddy. Aisha blinked hard, trying to make sense of it, trying to force her exhausted brain to catch up. You're their father." The words barely made it past her lips. The man turned to look at her, and his blue eyes filled with something that looked like equal parts relief and devastation. "It appears so," he said quietly. "I never even knew. I'm so sorry." And then she recognized him. Remington Spencer. The name hit her like a second collapse. The handsome stranger from one night, years ago. A night she'd tried not to think about, because it had led to the greatest joy of her life, but also the deepest loneliness. He'd been a fleeting connection in a moment when she'd needed to feel seen, and then he was gone. She never told him about the pregnancy, never reached out. What would have been the point? Remington reached out, his hand trembling as it touched her shoulder. Aisha. He whispered her name like a prayer. When I got the call from the girls, I rushed here. I'm so sorry I'm late. Are you okay? His concern felt genuine, which somehow made it worse. Aisha felt anger rising in her throat. Anger at his absence, at the years she'd spent doing this alone, at the audacity of him appearing now when she was at her most vulnerable. But beneath the anger was something more complicated. Relief, confusion, fear. They called you their daddy. She managed to croak out. Remington nodded, tears now spilling freely down his face. Yes. I don't know how to explain this either. I had no idea they existed. I had no idea you... He stopped himself, looking at the twins, then back at Aisha. I know I wasn't in your life before, but I'm here now. I want to help you. All of you. Aisha's mind raced through impossible calculations. How had her daughters even found him? How did they know to call him? And more importantly, what did this mean for the fragile world she'd built? She'd told the girls their father wasn't in the picture, that it was just the three of them against the world, and they'd been okay with that because Aisha had made it okay. She'd been mother and father and everything in between. But now, here he was, Remington Spencer. And as he held her daughters close, as they clung to him like they'd known him their whole lives, Aisha felt something crack inside her chest. I did it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I raised them alone. Remington squeezed her hand. I know. And you did it beautifully. Look at how wonderful they are. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they terrified her. Because if he was here now, if he wanted to be their father, what did that mean for her? Are you going to take them away from me? The question came out small and broken. Remington's eyes widened in alarm. No, Aisha, never. I would never hurt what you've built. What I want is to be part of their lives now, if you'll let me. So here's what I want you to think about. If the person who should have been there from the beginning suddenly shows up when you're at your breaking point, do you let them in, or do you protect the life you fought so hard to build alone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And stay tuned, because what happens next will change everything Aisha thought she knew about family, love, and what it really means to be a father. The hospital room had become Aisha's entire world, and in that world, everything she thought she knew was unraveling thread by thread. Remington Spencer sat beside her bed, his hands clasped around hers like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. The twins had finally fallen asleep on a small couch the nurses had brought in, their matching outfits rumpled, their faces still stained with dried tears. And Aisha was trying to process how her carefully constructed life had just exploded in the span of a single morning. I need to explain something, Remington said softly, his voice barely above a whisper so as not to wake the girls. Aisha looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since waking up. He was older than she remembered from that night 6 years ago, lines of stress etched around his eyes, but he was unmistakably the same man. Successful, polished, the kind of person who moved through the world with a confidence that came from never having to worry about bills or broken-down cars, or whether there would be enough food for the week. I'm listening, Aisha said, though part of her wanted to tell him to leave, to take his guilt and his apologies and disappear back into whatever world he'd come from. Remington took a shaky breath. When your daughters called me, I was in a board meeting in Chicago. My assistant interrupted, something she never does, and told me there were 2 little girls on the line claiming to be my daughters. At first, I thought it was a prank, some kind of scam. But then I heard Taiwo's voice, and she was crying, and she said, our mommy fell down and won't wake up, and we don't know what to do, and you're our daddy even though we never met you, but mommy has your picture. He paused, wiping at his eyes. I didn't even ask questions. I just got in my car and drove, 3 hours straight, the whole time thinking, what if this is real? What if I have children I never knew about? Aisha's mind caught on one detail. They had your picture? Her voice came out sharper than she intended. Remington nodded. Apparently you kept a photo. From that night. They found it hidden in your bedroom, and somehow, God, they're smart kids, Aisha, somehow. They tracked down my company website, found the office number, and called. He laughed, but it was a broken sound. 6 years old, and they orchestrated a rescue mission for their mother. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? And Aisha did understand, but the understanding came with a crushing weight of shame. She'd kept that photo as a reminder of a night when she'd felt seen, when she'd felt like maybe she was more than just a struggling woman trying to make it in a town that didn't always welcome her. She'd never imagined her daughters would find it, would recognize its significance, would be resourceful enough and desperate enough to use it. I never meant for them to know, she whispered. I was going to tell them when they were older, when they could understand. Remington squeezed her hand tighter. I'm not angry, Aisha. How could I be? You did what you thought was right. But now I'm here, and I need you to know something. He leaned closer, his intensity making her heart race. I'm a billionaire. I know that sounds absurd to just state it like that, but it's relevant. I have resources, I have connections. I can make sure you never have to collapse from exhaustion again. I can make sure these girls have everything they could ever need, and I want to do that. Not because I'm trying to buy my way into your life, but because I owe you 6 years of support you should have had. The words should have felt like relief. Instead, they felt like a threat, because Aisha had built her identity on being the mother who could do it all, who didn't need anyone, who could turn scarcity into abundance through sheer force of will. And here was this man offering to sweep in and fix everything with money she'd never had access to. What about your wife? Aisha asked suddenly, remembering that detail from the brief research she'd done years ago when she'd looked him up online, back when she was pregnant and terrified and wondering if she should reach out. You're married, Remington. His face darkened. I am, or I was. It's complicated. He stood up, pacing the small hospital room like a caged animal. My marriage has been falling apart for years. We stayed together for appearances, for business reasons, for 100 justifications that all sound hollow now. But this, finding out I have daughters, it's made me realize I've been living a half-life, a performance, and I'm done with that. He turned back to her, and the determination in his eyes was almost frightening. I'm filing for divorce. I've already called my lawyer. By the end of this week, the paperwork will be in motion. Aisha felt like the room was spinning again, like she was back on that kitchen floor watching the tiles rush up to meet her. You can't make a decision like that because of one phone call. You don't even know if you're really their father. We'd need tests, we'd need... But Remington cut her off with a sad smile. I know, Aisha. I look at them and I know. They have my mother's eyes, my sister's smile, and besides, we can do a paternity test if you want certainty, but I don't need one. I feel it. They're mine. The possessiveness in his voice made Aisha's protective instincts flare. They're mine, she said firmly. I'm the one who carried them. I'm the one who was up every night when they were sick. I'm the one who learned to braid their hair from YouTube videos because I didn't have anyone to teach me. You don't get to walk in here after 6 years and claim them. Her voice had risen, and across the room, Kehinde stirred in her sleep. Aisha forced herself to breathe, to lower her voice. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to keep you away. I need you to understand that you're asking me to let a stranger into the most precious part of my life. Remington sat back down, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentler. You're right. I am a stranger, and I know I have to earn the right to be in their lives, in your life. I'm not asking you to trust me immediately. I'm just asking you to let me try. Let me prove that I'm serious about this, about them, about making up for lost time. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, pressing it into her palm. This has my personal number, not my assistant, me. You can call any time, day or night. And Aisha, I meant what I said about helping. I've already arranged to pay all your medical bills from this hospital stay. Please don't argue about it. It's the least I can do. Before Aisha could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. A man in a white coat entered, younger than Remington, with warm brown eyes and an easy smile that immediately put Aisha at ease. Miss Okonkwo? I'm Dr. Evan Caldwell. I'm the ER physician who treated you when you first arrived. I wanted to check in on how you're feeling." His gaze swept the room, taking in Remington, the sleeping twins, the tension that hung in the air like humidity before a storm. "Is this a good time? Or should I come back?" Something about his presence made Aisha want to cry with relief. Here was someone who wasn't demanding anything from her, wasn't trying to reshape her life with grand gestures and guilty promises. "No, please, come in," she said, perhaps a bit too eagerly. Evan moved to her bedside with practiced efficiency, checking the monitors, adjusting her for, asking questions about her pain levels and dizziness in a calm, professional tone that felt like a balm. And as he worked, Aisha found herself studying him. He wasn't conventionally handsome like Remington. His features were more angular, his frame leaner, but there was something solid about him. Dependable, present. "Your vitals look good," Evan said after a few minutes, making notes on his tablet. The fainting episode was caused by severe exhaustion and dehydration, coupled with dangerously low blood sugar. "From what I understand, you've been running yourself into the ground, taking care of these two." He glanced at the twins with genuine warmth. "They're lucky to have such a devoted mother. But you need to take care of yourself too, okay? You can't pour from an empty cup." The phrase was a cliché, but the way he said it, like he actually meant it, like he actually cared, made it feel profound. Remington cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the attention shifting away from their conversation. "Doctor, thank you for taking care of her. If there's anything else she needs, any specialists, any additional tests, cost is no object. I want to make sure she gets the best care possible." Evan's expression didn't change, but Aisha caught something flicker in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe. Or judgment. "Ms. Okonkwo is already receiving excellent care," he said evenly. "But I appreciate your concern. Are you family?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications neither man fully understood yet. "I'm the father of her children," Remington said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "I've been absent, but I'm here now, and I intend to make sure Aisha and the girls have everything they need." Evan nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I see. Well, family support is certainly important for recovery. Miss Okonkwo, I'll be back to check on you in a few hours. In the meantime, try to rest. Your body has been through a trauma, and healing takes time." As Evan turned to leave, Aisha surprised herself by reaching out. "Wait, Dr. Caldwell." He paused, looking back at her with those steady, kind eyes. Would you mind checking on the girls too? They've been through a lot today, and I just want to make sure they're okay. Emotionally, I mean. I know that's not really your department, but—" Evan's smile stopped her rambling. "Of course, I'll have one of our pediatric consultants stop by. And for what it's worth, they seem like incredibly resilient kids. The fact that they knew to call for help, that they kept their composure enough to get you the assistance you needed, that speaks volumes about how you've raised them. The validation from this stranger, this doctor who had no reason to see the best in her, made something crack in Aisha's chest. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, and she quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. But Evan didn't look uncomfortable. He simply handed her a tissue box and said, "It's okay to cry. You've been holding everything together for a long time. You're allowed to fall apart a little." And then he left, leaving Aisha with Remington and a confusing tangle of emotions she didn't have the energy to sort through. The next 3 days in the hospital became a strange dance between competing versions of support. Remington was there constantly, bringing expensive meals from restaurants Aisha had never heard of, arranging for a private room with a pull-out bed so the twins could stay with her, even hiring a child therapist to help the girls process the trauma of watching their mother collapse. His gestures were grand and overwhelming, each one a reminder of the vast gulf between his world and hers. When Taiwo mentioned she wished she could watch her favorite show, Remington had a television installed within the hour. When Kehinde complained about the hospital gown Aisha was wearing, he had boutique pajamas delivered. It was dizzying, intoxicating, and deeply unsettling. Because while Remington operated with the blunt force of wealth, Evan worked with the quiet precision of someone who understood that healing couldn't be bought. He appeared 3 times a day like clockwork, always with a reason. checking vitals, adjusting medications, reviewing test results. But Aisha began to suspect he was checking on her in ways that went beyond medical necessity. He brought coloring books for the twins from the pediatric ward and spent 20 minutes showing them how to draw cartoon animals. He snuck Aisha real coffee from the cafeteria because he'd overheard her complaining about the weak hospital brew. He sat with her one evening when Remington had stepped out and simply asked, "How are you really doing?" And meant it. "I don't know," Aisha admitted, exhausted by the effort of trying to appear strong. "A week ago, my biggest worry was whether I could afford new shoes for the girls before school started. Now I have a billionaire baby daddy promising to solve all my problems, and I should be grateful, but instead I just feel," she struggled to find the word, "invaded, like my life isn't mine anymore." Evan nodded, not rushing to fix or minimize her feelings. "That makes sense. Having your circumstances change overnight, even if it's for the better, can feel destabilizing. You've built a life based on your independence and resourcefulness. Someone swooping in to rescue you probably feels like they're saying all that work you did wasn't enough." The accuracy of his observations stunned her. "Yes, exactly that. How did you—" Evan shrugged. "I see a lot of patients who struggle with accepting help. Pride isn't always a bad thing, Ms. Okonkwo. It's what keeps us going when things are hard. But sometimes pride can also keep us isolated." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "For what it's worth, I think you should let him help. Not because you need rescuing, but because your daughters deserve to. Know their father, and you deserve to have some of the burden lifted. Just make sure it's on your terms. Don't let him steamroll you with his money." It was good advice, delivered without agenda, and Aisha found herself trusting this man she barely knew more than she trusted Remington with all his promises. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked suddenly. "You must have dozens of patients. I'm just another case file." Evan's expression softened. "You're not just another case file, and I'm being kind because you deserve kindness. Because I can see you've been surviving on fumes for too long, and someone needed to tell you that's not sustainable. And maybe," he hesitated, a slight flush creeping up his neck, "maybe because I think you're pretty remarkable, and I want to make sure you have the support you need to keep being remarkable." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Aisha wasn't ready to name. Before she could respond, the twins came barreling back into the room from the playroom where a nurse had taken them, and the spell was broken. But as Evan left with a promise to check in later, Aisha caught herself watching him go, wondering what it would be like to build something with a man who saw her as an equal rather than a problem to be solved. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep, and the hospital had grown quiet except for the distant beeping of machines and footsteps of nurses making their rounds, Remington returned with news that would change everything. He looked different, disheveled in a way Aisha had never seen him, his tie loosened, his usually perfect hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. "I need to tell you something," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "And I need you to hear me out before you react." Aisha's stomach clenched with anxiety. "What is it?" Remington pulled out his phone and showed her a document. "I met with my lawyer today. The divorce papers are filed. But that's not all. I've also had my attorney draft something else. Custody papers that give you full legal and physical custody of Taiwo and Kehinde, with me having visitation rights subject to your approval. I'm essentially signing away any legal claim to make decisions about them without your consent." Aisha stared at the document, her mind struggling to process what she was reading. "Why would you do that? Most fathers fight for custody, especially fathers with your kind of resources. You could take me to court and probably win. I can barely afford a lawyer, and you—" Her voice trailed off as the implications hit her. "You could take them if you wanted to." "But I don't want to," Remington said urgently, gripping her hand. "Aisha, I've spent the last 3 days watching you with our daughters, and I've realized something. You're not just their mother. You're their entire world. They feel safe with you in a way they'll never feel with me, at least not right away. And taking them away from you even, partially, would destroy that security. I won't do that to them. I won't do that to you. So I'm putting it in writing. You have complete control. You decide when I see them, how often, under what circumstances. I'm trusting you to be fair, but ultimately, This is your call." The gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to everything Aisha had braced herself for, that she didn't know how to respond. "This doesn't make sense. You barely know me. What if I decide you can never see them? What if I move across the country? You're just going to trust that I won't cut you out completely?" Remington's laugh was bitter. "I don't have much choice, do I? I can't force my way into their lives. I can only hope that by proving I'm serious, by showing you that I respect your role as their mother, you'll give me a chance to be their father too. And yes, there's a risk you'll shut me out. But I think I understand you well enough to know you won't. You're a good person, Aisha. Better than I deserve." Aisha's hands trembled as she held the document. This was power, real, legal power, over a man who had more money and influence than she could imagine. He was making himself vulnerable to her in a way that felt almost reckless. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. It's too much. Everything is happening too fast. I just want to go home and have things go back to normal. But I know they can't, and I don't know how to navigate this new reality where my daughters have a father who wants to be involved." "Take all the time you need," Remington said. "But before you make any decisions, I want to tell you about my wife. My soon-to-be ex-wife." He stood, pacing again, that restless energy radiating off him. "Her name is Caroline. We've been married for 8 years, no children. She never wanted them, and I thought I was okay with that. Our marriage was more of a business arrangement than a romance. Her family's real estate empire merged well with my tech investments. We looked good together at charity galas. We made sense on paper." He paused, his voice dropping. "But I've been miserable, Aisha. I've been going through the motions of a life that doesn't fit me, pretending to be satisfied with boardrooms and bottom lines when I felt hollow inside. And then I got that phone call from our daughters, and something woke up in me. Something I didn't even know was asleep. The idea that I'd created life, that. There were 2 little girls in the world who carried my DNA and needed me. It was like someone turned the lights on in a dark room. I saw how empty everything had been." Aisha watched him carefully, trying to determine if this was manipulation or genuine revelation. "So your daughters are what? Your midlife crisis? Your chance to feel like you matter?" The words came out harsher than she intended, but she needed to push back, needed to make sure he understood this wasn't about his redemption arc. Remington flinched, but didn't retreat. "Maybe. I don't know. But does it matter what prompted me to wake up if I'm actually awake now? If I'm actually willing to do the work?" Before Aisha could answer, there was another soft knock, and Evan entered for his evening check-in. The tension between the 2 men was immediate and palpable, like 2 wolves sizing each other up. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company," Evan said, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what he was interrupting. "I can come back." But Aisha shook her head, grateful for the buffer. "No, please. I'd actually like you to check my blood pressure. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed." As Evan moved to her side, professional and efficient, Aisha caught the way Remington's jaw tightened, the way his posture shifted into something more defensive. These 2 men were offering her completely different things, representing completely different futures, and she had no idea which path would lead to happiness or disaster. Evan finished his examination and made a note on his chart. "Your blood pressure is slightly elevated, but that's to be expected given the circumstances. Try to minimize stress where you can. Focus on rest and recovery." Remington spoke up, unable to help himself. "She's under stress because she's been doing everything alone for 6 years. That's going to change. I'm making sure she has help, a nanny, a housekeeper, whatever she needs." Evan's expression remained neutral, but Aisha saw his fingers tighten slightly on his tablet. "With respect, what Miss Okonkwo needs most is consistency and emotional support, not just material resources. Studies show that stress reduction comes primarily from strong social connections and feeling valued, not from outsourcing responsibilities." The room crackled with unspoken challenge. Remington opened his mouth to respond, but Aisha cut him off, exhausted by the testosterone-fueled posturing. "Thank you both. Truly. But I'm tired, and I need to sleep. Remington, We can talk about the custody papers tomorrow. Dr. Caldwell, thank you for checking in. I'll see you in the morning. It was a dismissal, firm and final, and both men had no choice but to accept it. After they left, Aisha lay in the dark, listening to the soft breathing of her daughters, trying to make sense of the impossible choice forming before her. Remington represented security, resources, the chance to finally stop struggling. But he also represented complications she couldn't fully anticipate, a man with a life she didn't understand, responsibilities that would always compete with his time, a world where she would be the outsider. And then there was Evan, who represented something quieter but no less significant: stability, presence, the kind of partnership built on mutual respect rather than guilt and obligation. But was she even in a position to choose? Did she have the luxury of making decisions based on what her heart wanted versus what her daughters needed? The questions circled her mind like vultures, picking at her certainty, until finally exhaustion claimed her and she fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning brought clarity in an unexpected form. Aisha was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions to rest, to eat properly, to let others help carry the load. Remington had arranged for a car service to take them home, and when they pulled up to her modest house on the outskirts of town, Aisha's breath caught. The small lawn had been freshly mowed, the sagging porch railing had been repaired, and inside, she discovered that her refrigerator was stocked with groceries, her cabinets organized, her laundry done and folded. A note on the kitchen counter read, "I hired a service to help get things in order. I hope this isn't overstepping. I just want to make things easier." Taiwo and Kahinde squealed with delight, running from room to room discovering the changes, but Aisha felt that familiar discomfort rising in her chest. He'd been in her home, had people going through her things, rearranging her life without asking. It was generous, it was invasive, it was both, and she didn't know how to reconcile the contradiction. "Mommy, look!" Kahinde called from the bathroom. Someone fixed the sink that always dripped. Aisha stood in her kitchen, her space, her sanctuary, and felt like a stranger. Everything was cleaner, more organized, undeniably better, but it didn't feel like hers anymore. She pulled out her phone and called the number on Remington's card. He answered on the first ring. "Aisha, is everything okay? Do you need something?" The eagerness in his voice made her feel guilty for the anger bubbling up, but she pushed forward anyway. "You can't do this, Remington. You can't just swoop in and change my life without asking. This is my home. These are my things. I know you're trying to help, but this feels like you're taking over, and I won't let that happen." There was silence on the other end, and then a heavy sigh. "You're right. I'm sorry. I got carried away. I just kept thinking about you coming home to all the same problems and stresses, and I wanted to fix it. But I should have asked first. I should have respected your boundaries." The genuine remorse in his voice softened her anger. "I appreciate what you're trying to do. I do. But I need you to understand that I've been making my own decisions for a long time, and I'm not ready to hand that control over to anyone, no matter how good their intentions are." "I understand," Remington said quietly. "And I promise, going forward, I'll ask before I do anything. No more surprises. But Aisha, can I see the girls? Tomorrow, maybe? I want to take them to the park, spend some time, getting to know them. You can come too, of course. I'm not trying to take them away for some unsupervised visit. I've missed 6 years. I don't want to miss any more moments." Aisha looked over at her daughters, who were now playing in their room, their laughter the sweetest sound she'd ever heard. They deserved to know their father. They deserved to have him in their lives if he was truly committed to being there. And denying them that opportunity because of her own fear and pride would be selfish. "Okay," she said finally. "Tomorrow, the park near the library, 2 o'clock. But Remington, if you hurt them, if you make promises you can't keep, if you disappear when things get hard, I will make sure you never see them again." "Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," he said. "Thank you, Aisha. Thank you for giving me a chance." That evening, as Aisha was preparing dinner, simple spaghetti, nothing fancy but made with love, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Evan standing on her porch, looking slightly sheepish, holding a casserole dish. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said quickly. "I just thought you might not feel up to cooking yet, so I made extra of my mom's chicken and rice. Recipe. It's nothing special, but it's comfort food, and I thought maybe—" He trailed off, clearly second-guessing himself. Aisha smiled, genuinely touched. "Dr. Caldwell, this is incredibly kind. Please, come in." Evan shook his head. "I can't stay. I'm on call in an hour. I just wanted to drop this off and make sure you were settling in okay. Are you feeling all right? Any dizziness or headaches?" His professional mask slipped back into place, but Aisha saw through it now. This wasn't just a doctor checking on a patient. This was something more. "I'm okay," she said softly. "Better than okay, actually. Thank you for this. And thank you for everything you did at the hospital. You made a terrifying situation feel manageable." Evan's smile was warm and genuine. "That's my job. But also, it wasn't just my job with you. I meant what I said before. You're remarkable, Aisha, and I hope you'll let me check in on you every now and then. Make sure you're taking care of yourself." "I'd like that," Aisha heard herself say, and meant it. As Evan walked back to his car, giving a little wave before driving off, Aisha stood in her doorway feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of someone drowning, but the warm, expansive hope of someone who might actually have options, who might actually deserve good things. Inside, Taiwo appeared at her elbow. "Mummy, who was that?" she asked, eyes bright with curiosity. "That was Dr. Caldwell, sweetie. He helped Mummy when she was sick." Taiwo nodded thoughtfully. "He's nice. I like him better than Daddy." The casual statement hit Aisha like a truck. "Baby, you can't say things like that. Remington is your father. Dr. Caldwell is just a friend." But Taiwo shook her head with the stubborn certainty only a 6-year-old could muster. "Daddy gives us stuff. Dr. Caldwell gave you stuff. That's different. Better." And with that profound observation, she skipped back to her room, leaving Aisha to ponder the wisdom of children and the complicated truth that love couldn't be bought, only earned through presence and care and the quiet accumulation of moments that mattered. The week that followed was a careful balancing act. Remington took the twins to the park as promised, and Aisha watched from a bench as her daughters slowly warmed to him. He was patient and attentive, pushing them on swings, buying them ice cream, listening to their endless chatter about school and friends and their favorite TV shows. And Aisha saw glimpses of the father he could be, engaged, loving, fully present in a way that surprised her. But she also saw the way he checked his phone constantly, the way he seemed uncomfortable with the messiness of children, the way he tried to solve every small problem with money instead of creativity. When Kehinde scraped her knee running too fast, Remington's first instinct was to call for a car to take them to urgent care. Aisha had to gently intervene, showing him how to clean the wound with bottled water and a tissue, how to distract Kehinde with a silly song until the tears stopped. These were skills she'd learned through necessity, through being the only person available when crises struck. And watching Remington fumble through basic childcare made her realize just how much work it would take to integrate him into their lives. Meanwhile, Evan became a steady presence in quiet ways. He texted to check in, always respectful of boundaries, but consistent in his care. He invited Aisha and the girls to a community garden project he volunteered with on weekends, where they spent Saturday mornings planting vegetables and learning about sustainable farming. The twins adored him because he treated them like intelligent people whose opinions mattered, because he taught them to look for ladybugs in the lettuce, because he never talked down to them or tried to buy their affection. And Aisha found herself comparing the two men constantly, unable to stop weighing what each brought to the table. With Remington came security, opportunity, the promise that her daughters would never want for anything material. With Evan came partnership, respect, the promise of building something real and lasting based on shared values rather than shared DNA. But was it fair to choose between them? Was it even her choice to make? Or did biology and legal obligation determine the shape her family would take? The answer came one evening when she sat in her backyard, watching fireflies dance in the warm Indiana twilight. The girls were inside getting ready for bed, and Aisha had stolen a moment of solitude to think. Her phone buzzed with a text from Remington. The divorce is final. Caroline signed everything. I'm free. The message should have felt triumphant, but instead felt heavy with implication. He'd dismantled his entire life for the possibility of being in hers. That was commitment. That was sacrifice. But was it love? Another text came through, this time from Evan. Saw a quote today that made me think of you. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. You have so much quiet courage, Aisha. Hope you know that the message was simple, without agenda, just an observation from someone who saw her clearly. And in that moment, Aisha understood something fundamental. She didn't have to choose between security and love. She didn't have to sacrifice her own happiness for her daughter's well-being. She could have both, but only if she had the courage to claim what she truly wanted. So when Remington arrived the next evening with papers for her to review, financial agreements, visitation schedules, college funds already established for the twins, Aisha listened patiently to his presentations and plans, and when he finished, she took his hands in hers and said gently but firmly, I'm grateful for everything you're doing. I'm grateful you want to be in the girls' lives. But I need you to understand something, Remington. You can be their father. You can be part of our family, but you can't be my partner. Not in the way you're hoping. The hurt that flashed across his face was genuine, and Aisha hated causing it, but she pushed forward. I care about you. I appreciate you. But what we had was one night 6 years ago, and we can't build a relationship on that foundation. We're different people with different lives, and trying to force something romantic between us would be doing a disservice to everyone, especially the girls. They need us to be stable co-parents, not dysfunctional partners trying to make something work that doesn't fit. Remington was quiet for a long moment, processing, and Aisha braced for anger or argument. But instead, he nodded slowly. You're right, he said finally. I think part of me wanted to believe we could be a fairy tale family, that I could swoop in and fix everything and we'd all live happily ever after. But that's not reality, is it? That's me trying to write a story that makes me feel less guilty about missing out. He smiled sadly. So what do we do now? We figure out how to be the best parents we can be, Aisha said simply. You get to know your daughters. You show up consistently. You prove that you're in this for the long haul, not just until the novelty wears off. And I promise to be fair, to give you opportunities to build real relationships with them. But we do this as partners in parenting, not as romantic partners. Can you accept that? Remington stood, and for a moment, Aisha thought he might argue, might try to change her mind with promises or logic or emotional appeals. But instead, he pulled her into a hug, brief, respectful, almost brotherly. I can accept that, he said against her hair. And Aisha, I hope you find someone who deserves you, someone who sees how extraordinary you are. Because you do deserve that. You deserve everything. As he left, Aisha felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. She'd been so afraid of making the wrong choice, of denying her daughters something they needed, that she'd forgotten she had the power to define the terms of her own life. Remington could be a good father without being her partner. The twins could have a relationship with him that was healthy and separate from her own romantic future. And she could choose to build something with someone who saw her as an equal, not a responsibility. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Evan. Are you free tomorrow evening? I'd like to talk. Maybe over coffee? The response came almost immediately. I'd love that. I'll bring the good stuff. None of that hospital cafeteria swill. And Aisha laughed, genuinely laughed, for what felt like the first time in weeks. But even as relief washed over her, a new question emerged, one that would require its own kind of courage to answer. Was she ready to let someone in? After years of being self-sufficient, of building walls to protect herself and her daughters from disappointment, could she actually lower her defenses enough to build something real with Evan? Or would fear and habit keep her isolated even when love was offering itself freely? The coffee shop was nothing special, just a local place on Main Street with mismatched chairs and the kind of worn wooden tables that had absorbed 1,000 conversations. But when Aisha walked in and saw Evan already there, 2 cups steaming in front of him, and that quiet smile on his face, It felt like the most important room in the world. He stood when he saw her, a gesture so old-fashioned and genuine it made her heart skip. "You came," he said, as if there'd been any doubt. "Of course I came," Aisha replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "You promised good coffee, and after the week I've had, I desperately need it." Evan pushed one of the cups toward her. "Fair trade Ethiopian blend. The owner sources it directly from a women's co-op in Addis Ababa. I figured you might appreciate the connection, the thoughtfulness of it, that he'd remembered her mentioning her parents were from Nigeria, but that she loved Ethiopian coffee, that he'd paid attention to small details most people forgot, made Aisha's throat tight with emotion. She took a sip, letting the rich, complex flavors ground her. "It's perfect," she said softly. "Thank you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Evan spoke, his voice careful. "How are things with Remington? I don't want to pry, but I've been worried about you navigating all of that." Aisha appreciated that he was asking rather than assuming, that he was giving her space to share only what she was comfortable with. "We talked," she said. "Really talked. And I told him that he could be in the girls' lives as their father. But that he and we're not going to be together romantically. We're CEO parents. That's it." Evan's expression was hard to read. Relief? Uncertainty? How did he take it? Aisha shrugged. "Better than I expected, honestly. I think part of him knew we were trying to force something that didn't exist. We had one night together 6 years ago. That's not a foundation for a relationship. It's barely an acquaintance." She paused, turning the warm cup between her hands. "But he's committed to being a good father. He's already set up college funds for the twins. He wants regular visitation, and I believe he's serious this time." "That's good," Evan said. "The girls deserve to have him in their lives if he's willing to do the work." He hesitated, then added, "And you deserve to make choices based on what you want, not just what's expected of you." The way he said it, with such certainty in her right to autonomy, made Aisha realize how rare that was. How many people in her life had tried to tell her what she should do, should want, should accept, without ever asking what would actually make her happy. "Can I ask you something?" Aisha said suddenly, the question escaping before she could second-guess it. "Why me? You're a doctor. You could date anyone. Why are you sitting here with a single mother of twins who comes with more baggage than an airport carousel?" Evan laughed, a real laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "First of all, your daughters aren't baggage. They're delightful humans who happen to share your DNA. Second, I'm sitting here because when I met you in that hospital, even in the middle of a crisis, you were thinking about everyone else. You were worried about your girls, making sure they weren't scared. You were apologizing to the nurses for taking up space. You have this incredible strength that doesn't announce itself. It just exists, steady and sure." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "And maybe it's selfish, but I want to be around that strength. I want to know the person who raised 2 amazing kids on her own while working full-time and somehow still finds reasons to smile. You're not a charity case, Aisha. You're someone I genuinely want to know better. If you'll let me." The vulnerability in his voice, the way he was putting himself out there without games or pretense, made Aisha's decision suddenly very simple. "I want that too," she said. "But I need you to understand something. I've been on my own for so long that letting someone in feels terrifying. I'm used to being the person everyone relies on, not being the person who gets to rely on someone else. So if we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need you to be patient with me. I need you to understand that trust is going to take time." Evan reached across the table and took her hand, his touch warm and solid. "I have all the time in the world," he said simply. "And Aisha, you don't have to do everything alone anymore. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." They stayed in that coffee shop for 3 hours, talking about everything and nothing. Evan told her about growing up in a small town in Ohio, about his mother who'd been a nurse and taught him that medicine was about caring for the whole person, not just treating symptoms. Aisha shared stories about her parents, about immigrating from Nigeria when she was 10, about the disorientation of trying to be Nigerian enough for her family and American enough for her peers. They discovered they both loved terrible reality TV shows and good science fiction novels. They debated whether deep dish pizza counted as pizza or was actually casserole. And somewhere in the middle of laughing about nothing important, Aisha realized she was happy, genuinely, freely happy in a way she hadn't been in years. When they finally left the coffee shop, the sun was setting, painting the Indiana sky in shades of orange and pink that looked like a promise. Evan walked her to her car, and before she could overthink it, Aisha stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me. Really seeing me." Evan's smile was soft and full of possibility. "Thank you for letting me," he replied. And as Aisha drove home, she felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the tight control she'd held over her heart for so long, a willingness to believe that maybe, just maybe, good things could happen without disaster following close behind. Over the next few weeks, a new rhythm established itself. Remington came by twice a week to spend time with Taiwo and Kehinde, taking them for ice cream or to the children's museum or just sitting on the floor of their room playing elaborate games with their dolls. He was learning, slowly but surely, how to be a father. How to listen when Kehinde talked about her day at school without trying to immediately fix every small problem. How to help Taiwo with her math homework without making her feel stupid when she didn't understand right away. And Aisha watched this transformation with cautious hope, seeing that maybe people really could change when they were motivated by love. But the real transformation was happening in her own life. Evan had become a fixture in their household, appearing for Sunday dinners he insisted on cooking, showing up at the twins' school play with flowers for both girls, helping Aisha fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom while teaching Taiwo and Kehinde about water pressure and pipe fittings. He never tried to replace Remington or position himself as the girl's real father. Instead, he simply showed up, consistently and without fanfare, proving through actions rather than words that he was committed to all three of them. One evening, about a month after that first coffee date, Aisha was cleaning up after dinner when she heard laughter from the living room. She peeked around the corner to find Evan on the floor with both girls, all three of them building an elaborate blanket fort. "This support beam is structurally unsound," Evan was saying with mock seriousness, pointing at a pillow. Kehinde giggled. "You sound like a teacher." Taiwo added more pillows. "We need windows. How else will we see the dragons coming?" And Evan played along, completely absorbed in their imaginary world, his expensive watch forgotten as he crawled around on hands and knees arranging furniture. Aisha's phone buzzed with a text from Remington. "Just wanted to say thank you for letting me be part of their lives. I know I don't deserve the grace you've shown me, but I'm grateful for it every day. The girls told me about Evan. They really like him. I'm glad you found someone good." The message was generous and genuine, without any trace of bitterness or jealousy, and Aisha felt a wave of relief. This was what healthy CO parenting could look like. Two adults putting their children's needs first, supporting each other's happiness even when it wasn't what they'd originally hoped for. She typed back, "They really like you too. You're doing great, Remington. Keep showing up. That's what matters." And she meant it. Because even though he'd missed the first 6 years, even though he'd stumbled and fumbled his way through learning to be a father, he was trying. He was present. And that counted for something important. Later that night, after the girls were asleep and Evan was getting ready to leave, Aisha stopped him at the door. "Stay," she said quietly. I'm not asking for anything complicated. I just don't want to say goodbye yet." Evan searched her face, making sure she was certain, and then nodded. They settled on the couch together, Aisha tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, and watched some mindless show on television without really seeing it. The comfort of his presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way he absently played with her hair, it all felt right in a way that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I'm falling for you," Evan said into the comfortable darkness, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's fast, I know we're still figuring things out, but I needed you to know, I'm all in, Aisha. Whenever you're ready, however this looks, I'm here." Aisha tilted her head up to look at him, seeing nothing but honesty in his expression. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted, "and it scares me because I've been hurt before. Not by Remington, he didn't owe me anything, but by life, by hoping for things that didn't materialize. by trusting that things would work out and having them fall apart instead. Evan pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I can't promise nothing will ever go wrong," he said. "Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise I won't abandon you when things get hard. I can promise I'll show up, even on the days when it's not easy or exciting. I can promise that what I feel for you isn't some passing fascination. It's real, and it's worth whatever work it takes to build something lasting." And in that moment, hearing those words from a man who'd already proven his commitment through countless small actions, Aisha let herself believe, let herself hope, let herself imagine a future where she wasn't carrying everything alone. The turning point came on an ordinary Saturday morning. Remington had taken the girls to a special exhibit at the Science Museum, something about dinosaurs that Kehinde had been begging to see for weeks. Aisha had the house to herself, a rare luxury she didn't quite know what to do with. She was standing in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd collapsed all those weeks ago, when Evan knocked on the door with a surprise. "I brought materials," he announced, holding up bags from the hardware store. "You mentioned that your back porch steps were getting wobbly, and I thought maybe we could fix them together. Unless you had other plans." Aisha laughed, shaking her head. "My big plans were laundry and maybe organizing the junk drawer. This is much better." They spent the next 3 hours working side by side, Evan patiently showing her how to measure and cut and secure the boards properly. He never took over or made her feel incompetent. Instead, he treated her as an equal partner in the project, asking her opinion, praising her when she got something right, gently correcting when she didn't. As they worked, they talked, really talked, in a way they hadn't had time for with the girls always around. Evan told her about his divorce 5 years ago, about a marriage that had ended not because of any dramatic betrayal, but simply because they'd grown into different people who wanted different things. She wanted to live in a big city, climb the corporate ladder, travel constantly, he explained, sanding down a rough edge on one of the steps. "And I wanted this: community, roots, the chance to know my neighbors' names and make a difference on a small, personal scale. Neither of us was wrong. We just weren't right for each other." Aisha understood that completely. "That's how I feel about Remington, I think," she said. "He's not a bad person, he's generous, and he's trying hard to be a good father. But we want fundamentally different things. He wants to solve problems with money and resources. I want to solve them with time and presence. He thinks love means grand gestures. I think love means showing up on ordinary Tuesdays." She looked at Evan, saw him really listening, really absorbing what she was saying. "You get that. You understand that the small stuff, fixing porch steps and cooking Sunday dinners, and remembering which twin likes which vegetable, that's what builds a life." Evan set down his hammer and pulled her close, not caring that they were both sweaty and covered in sawdust. "I do get it," he said, "because that's the life I want too. Not some performance for social media or some story I can tell at parties. Just the quiet, beautiful work of building something real with someone I love." The word hung in the air between them. Love. He'd said it casually, like it was simply a fact, but Aisha felt the weight of it settle over her heart. "You love me?" she asked, needing to hear it again, needing to be sure. Evan cupped her face in his hands, his eyes steady and sure. "I love you, Aisha. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love how you fight for your daughters. I love how you make jollof rice on Sunday mornings and sing off-key in the kitchen. I love that you're letting me be part of your life, even though it would be easier to keep everyone at arm's length. Yes, I love you." Aisha felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they weren't sad tears. They were the tears of someone who'd been holding her breath for years and could finally exhale. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't think I was allowed to. I thought I had to focus all my energy on being a good mother, that wanting more for myself was selfish. But you've shown me that I can be both. I can be a great mom and also be a woman who deserves love and partnership. Thank you for that." They kissed then, surrounded by wood shavings and tools, and it felt like a beginning. Not the fairy tale beginning where everything suddenly became perfect, but the real beginning where two imperfect people chose to build something together despite the messiness and complications and uncertainties that life guaranteed. When Remington brought the girls home later that afternoon, he found Aisha and Evan sitting on the newly repaired porch steps, drinking lemonade and laughing about some private joke. The twins came running up, full of stories about dinosaur bones and interactive exhibits, throwing themselves at both adults with equal enthusiasm. And Remington stood back, watching this scene that could have made him jealous or bitter, and instead found himself feeling grateful. He approached slowly, respectfully. "The porch looks great," he said. "You two make a good team." There was no sarcasm in his voice, just genuine observation. Evan stood, extending his hand. "Remington, good to officially meet you. The girls had a wonderful time today. They haven't stopped talking about the T-Rex skeleton." The two men shook hands, sizing each other up not as rivals but as two people who cared about the same children, who wanted the same happiness for the same woman, even if only one of them would get to share that happiness romantically. "Can we talk?" Remington asked Aisha. "Just for a minute?" Aisha nodded, giving Evan's hand a squeeze before standing. She and Remington walked a little ways down the sidewalk, out of earshot of the children. "I want you to know something," Remington started. "I've been doing a lot of therapy since the divorce, trying to figure out why I've spent so much of my life chasing success instead of meaning. And I've realized that finding out about the girls, having my world turned upside down, it was the best thing that could have happened to me." He smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way Aisha had rarely seen. "I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't hurt a little, seeing you with someone else. But it hurts in a good way, like stretching a muscle that's been cramped too long. Because I can see how happy you are with Evan. I can see how he treats you like an equal, how he's already become such a positive presence in my daughters' lives. And I'm grateful that if you're going to be with someone, it's someone like him." Remington paused, gathering his thoughts. "I want to make you an offer, not as someone trying to buy your affection or control your life, but as the father of your children who wants to support their mother. I've set up a trust fund for you, not for the girls. They already have theirs. This is for you, for your education if you want to go back to school, for starting a business if you have dreams you've put on hold, for whatever you need to build the life you want." Aisha's first instinct was to refuse, to say she didn't need his money, but something stopped her. This wasn't about pride. This was about Remington trying to make amends in the only way he knew how. And more importantly, it was about accepting that she deserved support, that taking help didn't make her weak or dependent. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll think about how to use it. Maybe I'll finally finish my nursing degree. I had to drop out when I found out I was pregnant, and I've always regretted not completing it." Remington's face lit up. "That would be amazing. You'd make an incredible nurse. You have that same quality Evan has, that ability to make people feel seen and cared for." They stood there for a moment, two people who'd created life together but would never share a life, finding peace in that truth. "We're going to be okay," Aisha said. "All of us. We're building something good here, even if it's not what any of us expected." Remington nodded. "Better than okay. We're building a family, just a different kind than the traditional model. And I think that's beautiful." As the weeks turned into months, that unconventional family took shape. The twins grew comfortable with their two-household reality, understanding that Daddy Remington's big house with the pool was for special weekends, while home with Mummy and Evan was where the everyday magic happened. They never seemed confused about who loved them or where they belonged. If anything, they seemed to understand on some fundamental level that love multiplied rather than divided, that having more people care about them was only ever a good thing. Aisha enrolled in nursing school, attending classes 3 evenings a week, while Evan stayed with the girls. Remington paid for her tuition without fanfare, simply wiring the money and sending a text that said, "Invest in yourself. You've earned it." And for the first time in her adult life, Aisha allowed herself to dream beyond survival, to imagine a future where she wasn't just getting by but actually thriving. One evening, about 6 months after that first coffee date, Evan made dinner for the whole family. Aisha, the twins, and surprisingly, Remington, who'd asked if he could join them for a normal weekday meal instead of just special occasions. It was slightly awkward at first, this blended configuration sitting around Aisha's modest dining table, but the girls' enthusiasm smoothed over the rough edges. They chattered about their day, demanded both fathers help with their homework, and treated the whole situation with the easy acceptance of children who knew they were loved. After dinner, while Remington and Evan were unexpectedly bonding over baseball scores and the twins were watching a movie, Aisha stepped outside onto her newly repaired porch. The Indiana evening was warm and soft, fireflies beginning their nightly dance, and she felt overwhelmed by gratitude. Her life hadn't turned out anything like she'd planned. It was messier, more complicated, filled with people and relationships she never could have predicted. But it was also richer, fuller, more beautiful than anything she'd imagined when she was alone and struggling and convinced she had to carry everything by herself. Evan found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You okay?" he asked softly. Aisha leaned back into his warmth. "Better than okay. I was just thinking about how a few months ago I was so exhausted I literally collapsed. And I thought that was rock bottom. But it wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Everything that's happened since then, all the chaos and confusion and unexpected connections, it all led here, to this moment, to this family we've built together. Do you regret any of it?" Evan asked. The collapse, Remington showing up, everything changing so fast. Aisha thought about it honestly. "I regret that I pushed myself to the breaking point. I regret that I thought asking for help was weakness. But do I regret where we ended up? Not for a second. Because I have you. The girls have a father who's learning to show up. And I'm learning that I don't have to choose between being strong and being loved. I can be both." Inside, they could hear Remington's laughter mixing with the twins' giggles, could see through the window this impossible family that had formed from crisis and choice and commitment. "I want to marry you," Evan said suddenly. "Not now. I'm not proposing without a ring and a proper plan. But someday, when you're ready, I want to make this official. I want to be not just a fixture in your life, but a permanent part of it. I want to adopt the girls if you and Remington are comfortable with that. I want to build a life with you that honors everything you've been through while creating something entirely new." Aisha turned in his arms, seeing the future reflected in his eyes. "Someday," she agreed, "when the timing is right, when the girls are ready to understand what that means. But Evan, I want that too. I want all of it." They sealed the promise with a kiss, and inside the house, Taiwo looked out the window and smiled. "Mommy's happy," she told her sister. Kehinde nodded wisely. "She deserves to be happy." And Remington, overhearing this exchange, felt his heart both break and heal simultaneously, knowing that his greatest contribution to his daughters' lives might simply be supporting their mother's joy. The story could end here, with everything neatly resolved and everyone settled into their new roles. But life, as Aisha had learned, didn't deal in neat endings. It dealt in continuous beginnings, in daily choices to show up and do the work and choose love, even when it was complicated. So instead of an ending, this was really just a marker, a point where one chapter closed and another began. Aisha would finish nursing school and get a job at the hospital where Evan worked, creating a career that allowed her to help others the way she'd been helped. Remington would eventually remarry, a woman who shared his values and wanted the partnership he'd been unable to build with Caroline, and the twins would gain a stepmother who treated them with warmth and respect. Evan would propose exactly 1 year after that first coffee date, with both girls' input on the ring design, and Aisha would say yes without hesitation. And through all of it, through the challenges and adjustments and inevitable conflicts that come with any family configuration, they would choose each other, over and over again. Because here's what Aisha had learned in the middle of her kitchen floor, in that moment when her body finally gave out from carrying too much for too long. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or square footage or any of the external markers society tells us matter. True wealth is measured in the people who show up when you're at your lowest, in the hands that reach out to help you stand, in the voices that tell you you're worth more than your productivity or your strength or your ability to do everything alone. Remington had offered her financial security, and she was grateful for it. But Evan had offered her something money couldn't buy: partnership, respect, the daily choice to see her as whole and worthy exactly as she was. And in choosing Evan, in choosing to let people help her, In choosing to believe she deserved love not despite her struggles but including them, Aisha had found the kind of wealth that actually mattered. So if you're watching this story and recognizing yourself in Aisha's exhaustion, in her fear of asking for help, in her belief that she had to do everything alone to prove her worth, I want you to hear this. You don't. You are allowed to be both strong and supported. You are allowed to accept help without shame. You are allowed to choose love even when it's complicated. You are allowed to build the family you need rather than the family you think you're supposed to have. Now I need you to do something for me. In the comments below, tell me about a time someone showed up for you when you needed it most. Not with money or grand gestures, but with presence, with consistent, unglamorous support. Because those are the stories we need to hear more of. The quiet heroes who prove that love is a verb, not just a feeling. Share your story. Honor the people who saw you at your worst and chose to stay anyway. And if you haven't found those people yet, know that they exist. Keep your heart open. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep believing you're worth the kind of love that shows up on ordinary Tuesdays. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your life or the person you want to become, hit that subscribe button. Because here at Stories by Mr. Gideon, we're building a community of people who believe that real life, messy, complicated, beautiful real life, is worth celebrating. Every week, I bring you stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances and finding strength they didn't know they had. Stories that remind us we're not alone in our struggles. Stories that prove love and community and chosen family can change everything. So, subscribe. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you are worthy of support. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of building the life you actually want, not just the life you think you have to settle for. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning.